All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to explore one of the most bizarre, absolutely fascinating, and honestly, kind of hilarious chapters in all of natural history. Seriously, we're talking about an evolutionary partnership that completely defies human logic and changed the world. And the crazy part? It all starts with an animal we usually picture as a terrifying apex predator.
Okay, picture this. You're a hunter-gatherer, roughing it in the Stone Age. It's roughly 15,000 years ago, somewhere in Eurasia. Your whole day is basically just waking up, finding food, and trying really hard not to die. So you're sitting around your campfire in the pitch black, you hear a rustling, you freeze. A pair of yellow eyes blinks at you from the dark. Now, common sense says almost any animal here is either going to bolt in terror or, try to eat your face. But this one, it doesn't. It just sits there, watching you from the edge of the light. And, for some reason, you decide not to throw your spear. And that one incredibly tense standoff, it sparks the greatest question of our shared biological history. Like, how exactly did that wolf eventually transform into an animal that sleeps on a fluffy pillow and literally cries when you leave the room for 30 seconds? The answer is so chaotic, and it entirely rewrites the history you probably learned in school. So, part one, the domestication myth and how we're shattering the caveman story. We really need to address this heavily romanticized version of dog domestication because, well, it completely falls apart under scientific scrutiny. We've all heard the heartwarming story, right? A brave prehistoric human finds an orphaned litter of wolf pups, takes them home, raises them with love, and trains them to be loyal hunting buddies. It's a gorgeous narrative. It's also entirely false. You literally cannot just tame a wild wolf pup. Even if you raise it from birth with endless cuddles in a warm bed, it's always going to retain those dangerous biological wolf instincts. Zoos and wildlife sanctuaries have known this for centuries. The actual truth is way stranger. We didn't choose to domesticate wolves. The wolves actually chose us. And they did it a long time ago. Dogs were the very first domesticated animal by a massive margin. They first pop up between 40,000 and 15,000 years ago. By 10,000 years ago, humans are purposefully burying them right alongside us in ancient villages. To put that in perspective, we didn't domesticate horses until about 6,000 years ago. So yeah, dogs were our best friends thousands of years before we invented farming and way before we even figured out how to bake bread.
Which brings us to part two, survival of the friendliest, or the garbage advantage. Let's look at how this self-domestication actually played out in the real world. Spoiler alert, it all revolves around prehistoric trash.
As humans got better at hunting, our camps started generating a lot of consistent, reliable garbage. Leftover bones, animal scraps, you name it. For an opportunistic scavenger like a wolf, this human garbage was basically a Michelin star restaurant opening up right in their territory. But here's the catch. The big, dominant, aggressive wolves, they wanted absolutely zero part of terrifying, fire-wielding humans. They kept their distance. Instead, it was the slightly calmer, less fearful wolves that dared to edge closer to the fire to scavenge. Because they didn't stress out around us, they got fed, they survived better, and they passed that genetic chillness right on to their puppies. It was this totally accidental natural selection for tameness playing out over generations. All right, part three, the biological weirdness, featuring the Soviet fox experiment. To wrap our heads around the bizarre physical changes this accidental selection caused, we've got to talk about a brilliant, underrated experiment from the 1950s by a Russian geneticist named Dmitry Belyaev. Working under the cover of studying foxes for the Soviet fur industry, Belyaev ran a remarkably simple but absolutely groundbreaking experiment. He took silver foxes, tested them, and selectively bred only the ones with the lowest fear and aggression toward humans. He selected exclusively for tameness, no other traits. And then, he just watched. What happened next was wild. Within just a few decades, we're talking decades here, not millennia, something very, very strange started happening to those foxes. Belyaev had actually stumbled onto a phenomenon called domestication syndrome. He found out that the genetic pathways for tameness and low stress are deeply biologically linked to a whole suite of entirely unexpected physical and developmental traits. Basically, when you select for calm behavior, you get a bizarre package deal of physical changes you didn't even ask for. Suddenly, Belyaev's friendly foxes were sporting a whole host of new traits. We're talking floppy ears, curled tails, spotted coats instead of solid silver, rounder faces. Their reproductive cycles even shifted.
They started barking differently, and get this, they actively sought out human eye contact. Completely without meaning to, selecting for tameness unlocked a cascade of dog-like traits in these foxes. For scientists, this proved that those ancient wolves hanging around our campfires probably started looking physically dog-like way faster than anyone ever thought possible. Moving to part 4, rewiring the dog brain, or hacking human emotion. Because as this ancient relationship sped up, dogs became cognitively different from wolves in some genuinely remarkable ways. They didn't just learn basic manners, their brains physically rewired. Just look at the behavioral contrast today. It is stark. If you point at something, a wolf will completely ignore you. Plus, in wolf society, direct eye contact is a major threat. It's a dominance challenge that basically says, we're about to fight. But a domestic dog puppy, even one that's barely interacted with humans, it will instinctively look right where you point. It's literally a genetic trait. And even crazier, dogs evolved to hold our gaze. When a dog looks into your eyes, both your brain and the dog's brain release oxytocin. That is the exact same chemical bonding hormone released between a human mother and her newborn infant. An apex carnivore was biologically rewired to chemically bond with us. It's mind-blowing. They even evolved specific biological tools just to maintain that bond. Take the levator anguli oculi medialis. That's the scientific name for a tiny facial muscle above a dog's eyebrows that wolves simply do not have. It has one job, and it's solely responsible for what we call puppy dog eyes. Over thousands of years, dogs unknowingly evolved this biological hack to manipulate our emotions. It makes their faces look sad and soft, which chemically triggers us to feel completely responsible for their well-being. And let's be honest, it is spectacularly effective. So part 5, the human takeover and the modern dog explosion. Because once humans firmly grabbed the steering wheel, that slow, natural selection for tameness got replaced by intentional and sometimes totally ridiculous human breeding. Back in the prehistoric era, natural scavenging was the main pressure, and it gave us calm, highly functional companions that actually helped us survive. But fast forward to the 19th century, and the Victorians introduced strict breed standards. Dog breeding morphed from a search for utility into a competitive aesthetic sport. Suddenly, humans were actively exploiting the genetic variation locked inside the dog genome to produce an absolutely insane range of body types. We essentially took this sleek, highly functional wolf body plan that took millions of years of evolution to perfect, and we reassembled it into a sad loaf of bread. In what is basically a blink of evolutionary time, humans aggressively bred everything from the lightning-fast, towering greyhound to the deeply unnatural yet, highly personable bulldog and dachshund. And this massive explosion in variety brings us to a rather hilarious modern absurdity. Today, 15,000 years after that first wolf carefully crept up to a campfire, someone out there is happily dropping $40 on a bag of artisanal, grain-free, salmon-infused dog food for an animal that frankly would be thrilled just to chew on a dirty sock it found on the floor. I mean, we spend more on pet care than many nations spend on education. Evolution is incredibly patient, but you gotta admit, it has quite a sense of humor. Which leads us to part 6, a mutual evolution, the partnership that built us. Because underneath the ridiculous tiny coats, the expensive kibble, and those dedicated Instagram accounts, there's a profound co-evolutionary partnership. And it didn't just change the wolf. It changed our species, too. We didn't just create dogs. Dogs helped create us. There's a very serious, rigorously studied scientific argument here. The domestication of dogs was a massive, significant factor in human success as a species. By acting as living alarm systems to warn us of predators and serving as tireless hunting partners, dogs directly contributed to human expansion and the dawn of civilization. In a very real way, the humans that kept dogs simply survived better. So, next time your dog falls asleep on your feet or stares at you with that absurdly yearning expression while you try to eat your dinner, will you see 15,000 years of mutual evolution staring back? That ancient bond was built slowly, completely by accident, and entirely against all standard biological logic of predator and prey. But it worked. It turned two vastly different creatures into a family, a partnership that has outlasted every single empire in human history. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.